In the year 60 AD, a major earthquake hit the city of Laodicea and neighboring Asian cities like Philadelphia. Earthquakes were part of daily life and happened with regular intervals. At previous occasions, the city had received financial help from the Roman government, from the imperial house. This time, however, the city refused. The Roman historian Tacitus described this attitude with the following words: "The city recovered by its own resources, without assistance from ourselves," that is, from the Roman government, the Senate. Welcome to Tidbits from the book of Revelation, chapter 3. In this chapter we have messages to 7 churches, and the last of these messages was sent to the city of Laodicea. In this chapter, chapter 3, verse 17, we read the following statement about Laodicea: "You say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing." The main point is that the description you find to these 7 churches reflect exactly features that were known for the time of John. So these churches and the message to the churches certainly were contemporary to John himself. Let's take another example or two. I'm reading from one of the great books about this particular aspect of archaeology and history in Turkey, biblical Turkey, by Mark Wilson. Now, he writes, "The city was noted in antiquity for a breed of sheep that produced soft, raven black wool. This local wool was the raw material for the textile factories that the Romans established to manufacture the sleeved tunic and the hooded cloak. Laodicea was also the home of a medical school in the 1st century, according to the geographer Strabo. One of its graduates was Demosthenes Philalethes, a renowned ophthalmologist who wrote an influential textbook on the eye." When we read the message to Laodicea, this is what Jesus wrote or said, and John wrote to them. "You are not realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so that you may be rich, and white garments, so you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen, and salve to anoint your eyes, so that you may see." In other words, these advices that are, of course, spiritual, reflect a very common situation in the city of Laodicea. It reflects the situation. John wrote a message that revealed local knowledge of the situation. So these messages to the 7 churches definitely were messages that would fit the context of the time. At the same time, we discovered or reflected last time on the fact that they are also prophetic. Not only are each of the individual churches told something about its future possibilities, there is a promise to those who conquer and so on. No, we also see that they may be understood as covering prophetically the history of the church down through the ages. So there is a contemporary element. There is also, for John, from his perspective, a prophetic element. We will give one example to illustrate how that can be applied, but before we do that, let's move to another aspect. The book of Revelation is well structured. It opens with an epistolary prologue, it closes with an epistolary epilogue. Then you have the messages to 7 churches in Minor Asia, and in the end of the book you have the description of the heavenly city, the 7 cities of Asia, and then your heavenly city. But even more, to each of those who conquer, those who are victorious, in these 7 cities of Asia, they are told, the one who conquers, I will give. And then Jesus has a promise. Each of these promises are then in some manner reflected in the description of the New Jerusalem. Let's take a couple of examples. To the first of the churches, Ephesus, it is said, the one who conquers, I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in God's paradise. Now, when you read in Revelation 22:2, you find the exact reference to this tree of life in God's paradise. To those who are victorious in the city of Smyrna, it is said that those who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. And you have to go to the end of the book, 26, in order to see what that means. The third of the churches, Pergamon, is given the promise, I will give you of the hidden manna. Now, that is not explicit in the latter part of the book, but indirectly there is a free access to the Ark of the Covenant where the manna was stored or hidden. But then more directly, more explicitly, those who are conquerors from Thyatira and who are performing the works or the deeds of Christ to the end, to him Jesus will give power over the nations. And that is explicitly mentioned in chapter 22, verse 5 and 16. And so you can move on. The last of the churches is given the promise, those who are conquerors, I will give to sit with me on my throne. And that is certainly mentioned in chapter 24. So what is the point? The point is that there's a close connection between those Christians who are believers in those cities of Minor Asia and those who will enter the gates of the New Jerusalem. They are already here and now by their acceptance in faith of Jesus Christ and his sacrifice for them. They are already here now regarded as citizens of the heavenly Jerusalem. So those who are conquerors, those who are victorious in the cities of this world, will be one day revealed as truly citizens of the heavenly Jerusalem. And then back to one aspect that could illustrate how the 7 churches or the message to them actually also reveals a prophetic history of the church. To the last of the churches, Revelation, you have this very famous statement by Jesus in chapter 3, verse 20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. The promise of a fellowship meal is the content here. The image is very well known. Jesus is standing at the door knocking. Many people would have seen this famous painting where Jesus is standing at the door of the United Nations building in New York, knocking at the door to get in. But if you look at the appeals given to the previous churches, especially from the 4th of them and onwards, that is from Thyatira, then Sardis and Philadelphia, you find that there is a certain development. The 4th of these churches, Thyatira, is asked patiently to wait until Jesus comes. This is even stronger to the next one, Philadelphia, or that is after Sardis, but to the last one, Laodicea, as we have read, the situation has changed. It is no longer the church who is asked to wait for Jesus. He is standing and knocking. He is waiting for the church to respond. So here you have a movement towards the end, maybe illustrated by the fact that to the last of these churches, Jesus presents himself both as the beginning and the end. He speaks to Laodicea in chapter 3, verse 14, and asks John to write, the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's creation. So Jesus is the beginning, the creator, but he is also the end, the Amen. So this is the last of the seven. And how these messages, all messages to the seven churches, relate to what follows, we will look more into as we next time take another tidbit from Revelation chapter 4. Thank you for listening.